Same thing in New York, Occupy Boston as well as Occupy LA, that focuses on corporate greed. It talks about individual liberty, it talks about social justice, it talks about democratic accountability, especially the 1% who own 40% of the wealth.
I think so, Keith, and the short answer is that the poor are being rendered invisible in this country every day. They're being treated as if they're disposable, as if they're an afterthought. The worst thing you can do to human beings, as evidenced by these Occupy movements, the worst thing you can do to a human being is to make him or her feel like they don't matter, as if they are, in fact, invisible. And I want to just add right quickly, I was listening to the show earlier, of course, and there's some who have a problem with a lack of coherent or cohesive message. Maybe it's a bit counterintuitive, Keith, I don't feel that same pressure. There are a lot of folk out here who have a lot of legitimate grievances, and as long as these protests continue to grow, somebody in Washington is going to have to start asking them what their grievances are. So you lay out a list and we start talking about how we address the problems. There doesn't have to be one particular grievance, as was the case during the Civil Rights era.
I think it's a step-by-step process. This is the early stages of not just a national movement, this is an international movement. 108 cities around the world, over 70 cities in the United States. We know wealth inequality is wrong. We know corporate greed needs to be reined in. We know, in fact, that there's a corporate greed at work in the prison-industrial complex, the military-industrial complex, the corporate media complex, and Wall Street. We're looking for the connections, but we're trying to do it in such a way that we keep alive the best of democracy. It has to do with a love for ordinary people, a love for everyday people, and trying to ensure that our elites are democratically accountable.
I think the grievances that African Americans and Hispanics have are legitimate as well, and I'm starting to see more and more people of color engage this particular movement. The reality is, as you well know, that black and brown people are hurting the most, and I've raised three questions, Keith, that I think black folk, to your question, have to start to wrestle with. Number one, what is the pain threshold in black and brown America? For black folk especially, they've been too, shall I say, deferential to this White House. What is the pain threshold in black America, number one? For black people, number two, what is the presidency actually worth? Is it worth our silence, worth our capitulation in deference to the president? What's it worth? And number three, how is history going to regard the silence of black folk in this particular moment? While you celebrate an African-American president in the White House, it's clear the numbers indicate the bottom is falling out of black America. So are black folk being too quiet and too deferential in this moment where they, quite frankly, are catching the most hell?
There's an intimate connection between corporate greed running amok at the top and escalating poverty at the bottom, be it poor white, poor brown, poor yellow, poor black, or what have you. But we also have to keep in mind there's a cultural difference. The Tea Party looks more like the audience of Lawrence Welk in the National Hockey League. The Wall Street occupation, we look more like the audience of Lupe Fiasco, or the audience of Carole King and James Taylor. There's a cultural sensibility that is different in that regard. And they're wrong if they say that the Wall Street occupation group is 99% white. That's just a lie. I've been there, that's LA, and so we got brown, you got yellow, we got red, brothers and sisters. We are an all-inclusive movement. We embrace prophetic Mormons. Because the prophetic Mormons are about social justice and corporate greed, come join us. Brother Bill Maher, he's my dear agnostic brother. He's with us. Paul Krugman in the New York Times comes out. He's with us. We're open in ways that the Tea Party couldn't imagine to do.
I'm not so sure it's their underlying mission or motive, but certainly as a member of the media, like yourself, I try every day to use the platforms I've been blessed to have to challenge Americans to re-examine their assumptions, to expand their inventory of ideas, to look at the world through a different prism. And so what we did on this tour this summer going to 11 states and 18 cities is to try to put a face on these numbers, Keith, that you and I talk about every night. And when you connect these numbers to the humanity of everyday people, I think perhaps we can get some traction on this conversation. So I'm hoping that this 5-night conversation about poverty next week will advance the conversation in some small way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Keith.